What's up, everybody? TENDO here, and I've been thinking, most of the time that we do something for the first time, we don't really remember it, do we? We were all too young to remember the first time that we walked. Maybe if we're lucky, we remember the first time we rode a bike. But do any of you remember the first time that you played a video game? I'm lucky enough to remember the first time I played a video game. It was Super Mario Brothers. The reason that I'm able to remember the first time that I played a video game is because the people and events that surrounded me playing the first video game I ever played were, I don't want to say traumatic, because that's a little over dramatic, but let's just say scary. Scary for a 7-year-old. I was 7 years old, and my dad woke me up and said, "Come on, son, get up, we're going over to Tim's house." At any time that my dad said, "Get up, we're going to Tim's house," I tried to get out of it. I tried to say, "Oh, I don't really feel like it, I don't want to go." Of course, my dad, being my dad, say, "Get up, you're going anyways." Tim's house was a scary house for a multitude of reasons. First and foremost, because it was a big brick 3-story house that sat alone in the middle of an industrialized zone. So you have all this kind of dirty, busy street going on, and then just a residential house. That was weird without me even realizing why, but looking back on it, it was pretty weird. And then second, there's this brick fence outside of Tim's house that every time you would pull up, the fence posts right outside of it that were made of brick, made out of the same brick as the brick house, would be either freshly cemented or it would be knocked over. And this is also very interesting because my father and grandfather are both bricklayers, and my grandfather originally built this brick wall around Tim's house, and subsequently over the years made much more money rebuilding these fence posts because the weird angle at which you had to pull into the driveway at Tim's house always caused people to run into these fence posts. So of course on this day, going over to Tim's house, this fence post was knocked over, bricks everywhere. But that's just the first of many reasons. Another reason that it was so scary to go over to Tim's house was that Tim was just a massive human being. Especially to a 6-year-old. I mean, he's still big now. I know him. He's in his 70s, and his arms are twice as big around as mine. But the only thing bigger than Tim was his massive dog. If I had to guess what kind of dog it was probably some sort of Mastiff, but this was so long ago, I don't remember. I just remember that it was brown and woolly, just massive amounts of this shaggy brown hair. And being a little 6-year-old that hadn't been around such large creatures up to this point in my life, I probably was just scared for no reason and the dog only wanted to play. But every time I would go to Tim's house, I would have to open the gate and dart to his door and run inside so that the dog wouldn't, in my mind, eat me alive. Looking back now on it, of course, the dog probably just wanted to play and I could have just cuddled up with it and it'd been fine, but I was scared out of my mind. And probably the scariest part of this house, once you got past the giant man and the even bigger dog, was the inside of this house. It was just empty. This house was a house that was built in the mid to late 1800s, and it's just this big open house. The doorways are twice as tall as they need to be. And for whatever reason, Tim didn't have a lot of furniture or anything in this house. He had a chair and he had a bed and nothing extra, right? And so you would just go in this house and my dad and him would just go off and chat, and I would wander this huge 3-story house and there's nothing in it. It was just spooky for a 6 or 7-year-old, right? So on this occasion, me and my dad visiting Tim's house, I walk in the door and Tim looks at me and says, "Young man, you can go downstairs. My son's playing video games." He called them video games. And of course, I'm just spooked already because the scariest part of this house is this big empty basement with nothing in it. And I say, I don't really want to, being the scared 7-year-old that I am. And Dad says, "Go downstairs." So, okay, I turn and I slowly walk. I take all the time in the world that I can to walk down this flight of stairs. And another thing, this flight of stairs, I can remember it so well. They were super steep, right? They were twice as steep as any modern stairs you've ever walked up. And so you had to hold the handrail or you would fall down them. So I've went way out of my way to explain to you how big Tim was, how big Tim's house was, how big Tim's dog was. Heck, I could go on about how big Tim's yard was. It was 2 football fields. Everything about Tim was big. The chair inside of his empty house, it was big. But none of these things prepared me for how big little Tim was. And that's what was at the bottom of the stairs, little Tim. Little Tim was twice the size of Big Tim. Little Tim was the biggest human being I had ever seen in the entirety of my 7 years of being on this earth. And I about died when I saw him. Little Tim's head was the size of, I can't even think of a good comparison, a sack of potatoes. I don't know. A huge beach ball. Just, and then not to even mention the huge muscles he had. Just his arms. I'm standing before you now, a 6'6" man, 350 pounds. I have really large legs. His arms were as big as my legs are now as a grown man. Just a huge man. And before I continue with the story, I need to tell you a little bit more about Little Tim. Little Tim is a complicated being. Everybody I know that knows him, everyone in my family that knew him well, has a crazy Little Tim story. My mom likes to tell a story about when she was pregnant with me, and my father, a traveling bricklayer, was out of town on work. And she's at home alone, bored, and a knock comes at the door. She opens it, and it's Little Tim looking for my dad, because Little Tim is scared out of his mind because he has just beat the living daylights out of another person, and he ran from the scene, and he's afraid the guy's dead, and they're going to come get him and take him to jail. Crazy stuff, right? Not normal people stuff. That might have perhaps been the wrong story to start with to describe Little Tim. Maybe not, because what I want to illustrate is that Little Tim was a complicated dude. He was a bad dude, but a lot of people would still describe him as a good dude. Complicated, right? So another story to illustrate this is one that my brother likes to tell, how he was drinking in a bar one time and he got in a little bit of an altercation with these guys, and out of nowhere, unbeknownst to him, Little Tim rolls up. Don't worry. He doesn't kill the guys, he doesn't beat the crap out of them, but he very easily scares them away. And that's probably that's probably a good example of most of the stories you'll hear about Little Tim. Just a scary dude. He scared these guys away and then continued to buy my brother a drink and catch up with him. You know, tough dude, scary dude, but an all right guy. Most of my personal stories about encountering Little Tim in the wild years later after the story that I'm telling you were more like, you know, I was raised in church and I was always with church kids, youth group, out and about in town, and, you know, we'd be at a Burger King, something like that, and I would just hear, "Fucking Blanton!" And of course, all these little church kids, these poor, innocent little church kids would just turn around, looking around, and here comes the largest man they've ever seen. Strolls right up to us, grabs me by the shoulder, picks me up out of my chair with one hand, effortlessly, gives me a big hug and asks me how I'm doing, and stands there, "Fucking Blanton, so good to see you." You know, just, that was most of my encounters out in the wild with Little Tim when I would see him in public. I'm 89% sure he's in prison right now, and he's been in and out of prison 100 times. And again, to just illustrate that complicated nature of him, the last time I recall him being let out of prison, he was in there for a stretch, and another inmate tried to stab a guard, and Little Tim put himself in between the guy with the knife and the guard, and was let out early for that good behavior, and I guess being good overall anyways. So again, just complicated dude. Not a dude that really you want to take your 7-year-old around all the time, but that's what happened. I played a lot of video games with Little Tim. So let's get back to the first time that I played video games with Tim, which was also the first time I ever played video games. So I'm standing there trying to decide what to do. Do I call out to him, say, "Hey, I'm Blanton's son"? Do I sneak back upstairs and sneak around the rest of the house and just avoid this situation? So I just stand there for a few moments watching him, and he's playing Tetris. And he's playing Tetris at a mind-blowing speed. And his face is this far from the screen, and he's killing it. Tetris after Tetris after Tetris. And I would come to watch him do this very often when visiting Tim and Little Tim's house. And so I'm standing there. I just don't know what to do in this situation. And then I just hear, "Sit down." He knows I'm there. I don't know if he heard the conversation from upstairs. Looking back on it now, that's probably what happened, because this house is empty and it's echoey. So he had a read on the situation. 7-year-old me absolutely did not. So I do as I'm told, and I go sit down beside Little Tim as he's just killing it at Tetris. And he goes, "I'm almost done, and then you can play." So I sit there and I watch him, and sure enough, he eventually finishes this game of Tetris, and he hands me the controller. He reaches over, pulls out Tetris, and puts another card in. He says, "You ever played this before?" And I was like, "No, I've never, no, sir, never." "Don't call me sir," he says, just messing with me. I'm scared out of my mind. This large gorilla is going to eat 7-year-old me. And so he puts the cartridge in, presses the button, ding, and on comes Super Mario. I start playing the game, and it's immediately intuitive. I immediately die running into some strange creature I've never seen before, but that immediately tells me not to run into anything that's moving. And within minutes, I beat the first level. And as soon as I beat the first level, this giant gorilla gives me this huge pat on the back, and I feel like I'm going to die. And he just laughs, and he laughs, and he laughs. And then we sat there for what felt like hours and played the majority of the original Super Mario Brothers. And that's the first time I ever played video games. And I would subsequently, for ages later, every time Dad would say, "Come on, we're going to Tim's house." The dog wasn't scary anymore. The house wasn't scary anymore. The only thing that mattered was that I was going to play video games. And somehow, strangely, no matter what, when I went to Big Tim's house, Little Tim was downstairs playing video games. And I would just walk downstairs. I would sit down beside him. We wouldn't say a word. We'd sit there and play. You know, Little Tim's in prison now. He's hard to get a hold of. He's been in and out of prison so many times that I don't know if he'll get out this time. If he does, I definitely hope to see him clean and sober, and ask him if he remembers this, because I haven't ever discussed this with him. He would probably be amazed to find out that I'm running a heavily video game centric YouTube channel, and he was the one that first showed me what video games were. That's pretty special. So guys, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so that next time I do this, you get a notification. You can come and hang out with me then. And until then, guys, peace out.
Hey, I'm a shark with a top hat, and I think you should subscribe. Go ahead, hit the button. I'll wait.